Welcome all. Thank you all for being here. My name's Don Berg. I am the Executive Director of Deeper Learning Advocates. We are on a mission to embed the psychology of learning in policy, so policy stops undermining learning. So my background is that I actually am a certified professional nanny. So ECE is something I'm trained for. I actually did some work with 3- and 4-year-olds early in my career. So early childhood is very dear to my heart. But since then I've gone on to more focus on the K-12 space. But I think that we have an important conversation to have in the early childhood space as well, to think about how does this set it up for what the stuff in the K-12 arena. So one of the things that is commonly thought about in, or that is a common attitude, is that the professionalism of particularly K-12 education is in contradiction to the playfulness of children. You have to get them to get down and do the work. And so I think we need to think through that a little more clearly, and that's what this talk is focused on. Now, one of the things about this is that I have to warn you that there are some moral issues that come up when in the way that I talk about this. And so it can be challenging. It can be upsetting. And so if you choose to stay, do seek out support if you need it. This is, sometimes a challenging issue to face. After warning you, I want to share that I also live on a llama ranch. So I put cute llamas up and we can lighten up a little bit. I live on a llama ranch in West Lynn. Those little ones over there are a couple of years ago. This is us up on the trails. That is the peak of Mount Hood right there. This is Upper Twin Lake, just off Highway 26. And that is Fonzie, the photogenic one on the bottom there.
Doing a side profile.
Yeah, he just loves it. This is Deonda, Brianna. You can hardly see it, but it's also Pepe and Fonzie in the back.
How many llamas?
We have, I believe, 26 right now. We have one due any time now. So my partner has been breeding llamas for about 30 years. So yeah, that, like I said, that's we actually have a few little ones that have just been kind of moved away. We've got 2 more little ones that are in it. And this is Zhu. He's now part of our pack string. And these guys got sold, and that is Coretta, and I believe she's not pregnant this year, but she had a baby last year. So. Kriya is the name for a baby llama.
Kriya?
Kriya.
In Spanish, like Kriya, like it's like a baby, like a small
Right. I think it's related somehow. Okay. Oh, and the relevant thing here is I told you I'm a certified professional nanny, but I also have a degree in psychology from Reed College. So there's that too. And that's another story. Okay, so let me read you a story. It's called The Art of Marcus. Marcus drew on everything. Napkins, worksheets, even his arms. At 8 years old, his sketches of dragons and robots covered every margin of his homework. His art was so good that his mother, Jane, kept a folder labeled Marcus's masterpieces. Then one Tuesday in October, he stopped. His teacher, Ms. Williams, had implemented a new focus system. She explained that when they do math, they were going to do their work like mathematicians. No doodling, no choosing seats or partners to work with, lots of lectures followed by worksheets, one after another. She announced to the class, "This is how we'll succeed on the state test." By Thursday, Marcus hadn't drawn a single line. By Friday, he could solve basic math problems he'd previously mastered. One day, Jane found him locked in his closet, and when she finally coaxed him to unlock the door, he curled up on the floor and crumpled his homework beside him and said, "I'm stupid." Jane called for an emergency conference with Ms. Williams and the principal, Mr. Torres. At their meeting, Ms. Williams started off by putting Marcus's work folder on the desk. "His scores are down. He's falling behind. He won't focus." Jane cocked her head to the side and said, "Is that right? Well, if his test score is so important, I've heard that of a teacher in a school in Thorcaster that got her students' test scores up by putting plastic bags over their heads for a little suffocation intervention. Would you like to try that one out? Or about a technique from a school in Shizuoka, where all the adults ensure that no one eats until the test scores go up. Are test scores important enough to try out a little starvation? Don't be absurd, Ms. Williams declared, of course. I don't know what you're doing, but when it causes my son to get dumber and stop being himself, it must be just as absurd. He stopped drawing. He stopped laughing. The other day I found him locked in his closet and he told me he's stupid. I think you are doing something just as bad as suffocating and starving him. I just don't know what to call it. So we're going to pause the story there. So this talk is going to be focused on how do we reconcile, what needs to be reconciled between professionalism and playfulness. What is the role of engagement in education? And then, of course, what is our in loco parentis duty of care to children? So, like I said, my focus has been on older kids mainly. So this is a typical pattern for 3rd to 5th graders. This is recent data from the US. And so we're going to get into the more numbers and things later, but for now you see the rough proportions. And what happens is that the stuff up here, which is explorer mode and achiever mode, which are the learning side of things, decrease substantially, and passenger mode and resistor mode, which you can imagine are not the learning modes, increase substantially. So this is problematic. So disengagement is a fact of life in our schools. So you can see, there I filled in all the numbers for you, going from 30% disengaged by 3rd grade to 65%. So is early learning professionalism? Is our profession setting the stage for this to happen? Or is it doing something to mitigate against this pattern? Is it actually doing something positive and then something bad happens later? Okay. So what is the role of engagement in education? So more about those colors I showed you. So this is from a book called The Disengaged Teen. Just came out this year or last year, very recent. Written by a researcher and a journalist. Really readable book, really highly recommend it. And what we're looking at there is I realize, so they have different labels for how they put this together, but I realized that they were just describing how motivation and engagement interrelate. So the psychology I study, the degree I have, is in self-determination theory. And so basically it posits that there's fundamental needs that we have, but it's really a motivation theory. That's what it came out of, was they were trying to understand motivation. So the simple version is there's two kinds of motivation fundamentally, controlled and autonomous. So if the owner of the goal is the self, you get autonomous motivations, which are positive, and the distinction here is the impacts on well-being. So when you're autonomous, it's good for you. It's good for your mental well-being. But if somebody else is owning the goal, if you're not owning the goal for the activities that you're participating in, that is an other or controlled motivation. Somebody else is controlling your motivation, getting you to do things. And so motivation and then engagement, is there different levels at which this happens? A lot of people can identify with, if it's deeply motivated, but you're going to resist the other person, that's where you're counterproductive in a classroom, for instance. If the students are not on board with this and they're providing resistance, that's a challenge. That's why even in 3rd grade, if there's 5% resistors, that's setting up a big problem for you as an educator. But then if you're not going to resist, you're just going along as a passenger. You become invisible. And so you're just going along, going with the flow. And then if you take on, you say, okay, this isn't bad. This is something I want to learn. I want to learn to read, or I want to learn whatever is being on offer. then you become what I call a faux achiever. So you're not necessarily fully in it, but you're going along with the game. You're playing it. You're going ahead with whatever. And you'll do, like, for instance, in my education, my schooling in K-12, I was most often in this category. I was most often going along and saying, hey, I'll get a grade, I'll get things, it seems interesting, I'll kind of go along. But what we really want is when you really own the goals themselves and really take it on. And the difference between behavioral engagement is the shallow part, but the deep agentic engagement is where you insert yourself, your identity, your ideas, your emotions, who you are into the learning situation in order to get more out of it. The same thing's happening over here. It's just that you've got misalignment of goals. They're trying to resist the goals that are in the situation, and the explorer is saying, I'm taking those on and I'm running with them. But either way, their identity is being put into this room. Okay. So the way self-determination theory, so you've got all those down here. How do those develop? So, like I said, controlled and autonomous motivations, clear there. But this is the key part here. All humans have primary psychological needs for relatedness, autonomy, and competence. When those needs are being thwarted or neglected, you end up here. When those needs are being satisfied, you end up here. So now you can understand some of the language I used in that story. If needs are thwarted, that's a problem. Okay, so we're going to go into needs a little more detail. Okay, no reasonable parent would send their child to a school that suffocated, dehydrated, starved, or recklessly exposed them to life-threatening elements. No reasonable parent would do that. Okay. No reasonable government that has an interest in educated children would allow that to happen either, for the same reason. Okay, so we're talking about air, food, shelter there. Air, water, food, shelter. Now, the different needs have slightly different ways that they occur in the world. So, in theory, you wouldn't have to send water, you wouldn't have to provide water at school all the time. Of course we do, because it's impractical not to. But in theory, you could send the kids without water. You could do the same with food. You can just send food from home. Here, I'll just go to the next one. But you would never think of a school not providing air. It's pervasive. It's everywhere. That would be crazy, right? But that changes. In fact, if you remember, I forget which school it is in Portland. It was it was located right next to the highway. And I actually am the co-founder and for 8 years was worked for Portland Clean Air. And so we fought industrial air pollution here in Portland. And the school was located next to that, and we installed air filters to show the difference in air quality when you do that. And so the district has decided to move the entire school. No one said provide, individual breathing air filters for every person or anything like that. We actually did put air filters in the classrooms, but no one proposed the idea of every individual having their own air supply, okay? Because that's ridiculous, okay? So the provision of support for that need is different, and that makes creates an interesting challenge. So there's one. So these other ones are physiological needs. This is a psychological need. The reason it's psychological is because you don't die from a lack of it. Those other things will kill you if you don't get those needs met. But this one, you get more anxiety, depression, and other forms of distress, psychological distress. You can die from the things that it causes. You can fall asleep at the wheel, and then you'll die. But it wasn't the lack of sleep that killed you. It was something else. So sleep is a psychological need as opposed to a physiological need. So the question is, and schools don't provide for sleep except for the little ones, and that's okay. So the key question is, relatedness, autonomy, and competence, where do they go? There is a line of thought in certain circles of the world that say that basically those things should be provided, supported from home, not at the school. School should only be focused on academics. Okay? That's not reasonable. They need to be provided with those things in the same way that air is provided. It needs to be pervasive in their environment, or they are being harmed. Okay? Okay. And when you support all three of those psychological needs, you get playfulness in children. Okay? Genuine playfulness, the stuff that's silly and doing other things. There is a question about whether or not guided play is play at all. There's a psychologist named Peter Gray who defines play in a very specific way, and one of the key elements of that is they can opt out at any moment. And if it's guided play in structured situations in schools, sometimes they don't have that option, and so by his definition, that is no longer play. But I'm not concerned about that in particular. I think that we can be pretty playful even with providing structure and things that guide children in other ways. But there's a little bit of controversy there around what counts as playfulness. I think we can be a little more flexible than Peter Gray. So up in the corner there, that's a formula. So genuine play is a function of relatedness support, autonomy support, and competence support. Okay. Now, let's talk about the duty of care that we all share. Anytime anyone other than the parents are taking care of a child, this is the way it is. Legally, they have that responsibility. I hope that we all agree that we morally have that responsibility as well. It's basic, it's fundamental. Okay, so let's finish the story. We left off at the emergency meeting between Jane, Marcus's mom, who was reading the riot act to Ms. Williams, Marcus's teacher. So the principal, Mr. Torres, had been in the background listening from near the doorway. He just returned from a conference on self-determination theory. Ms. Williams, I might have something relevant to offer. He steps in between Marcus and Ms. Williams and kneels down and saying, Marcus, if you could learn math any way you wanted, how would you do it? Marcus' eyes flickered. Could I draw the problems, like make numbers into characters? Show me. Marcus grabbed a pencil. He drew a wizard, 2 goblin warriors, and an orc. The wizard needed 7 more warriors for his army of 10. The math was correct. Most importantly, Marcus was smiling. Mr. Torres turned to Ms. Williams. When we took custody of Marcus at 8:15 this morning, we took responsibility for all his needs. Not just keeping him physically safe, but psychologically alive. He needs to make choices, connect with others, and to feel capable. That's not optional. It's our duty of care. But what about the test scores, Ms. Williams replies. They will improve as Marcus can think clearly again. Just you wait and see. Over the next month, Mrs. Williams reluctantly let students choose learning partners, pick from different problem-solving methods, and yes, draw in the margins. Test scores rose exactly as predicted. But Mr. Torres found something new to keep on his desk. A new dragon Marcus had drawn, breathing mathematical fire across a worksheet full of correct answers. And below it, Marcus had written, Math Wizard Level, Expert. He was so inspired by Marcus' turnaround that he lobbied the district to require all teachers to complete training on psychological needs. They call it educational hygiene. Because parents watching their children's creativity dry up and blow away is not okay, but too many schools do it anyway. The end of the story, not the workshop. So, professionalism, as we as professionals understand it, is setting the conditions for the educative process. So there's an interesting book. Michael Fullen is famously a principal. He's been the principal. He's Canadian, but he writes a tremendous number of books about the profession of being a principal of the school. And they wrote with Andy Hargreaves, who's I believe from the UK, but this is a book called Professional Capital, and their contention is that if you what they called this is actually the source of my other thing in the sense that I was inspired to write it. So they say that the climate of the school the professional capital is a function of human capital, social capital, and decisional capital. Now, I'm not going to go to explaining those terms, but if all humans have primary psychological needs for relatedness, autonomy, and competence, then you can safely say, what I would contend having read the book, essentially what he was describing was, here are ways that you as a school principal can support relatedness, autonomy, and competence. He just had different words for it. In fact, he did not reference any of the self-determination theory stuff at all in the book Professional Capital, but the way he describes everything, it fits perfectly. So this, to me, says, and this is where the reconciliation of playfulness and professionalism comes together, to say they're the same thing. There's a child version and there's an adult version. A true professional geeks out on their profession. They're just playing. They're just doing their thing. When they're supported as professionals to do their thing. The problem we have now in most schools is they're not being supported as the professionals that they are. They're having their various capitals undermined rather than supported. Bureaucratic requirements and other things get in the way. And some misguided attitudes about children, for instance, that they should not be playing, they should be working, is problematic. So to me, the true educative process is expressing what I call agency, which is just relatedness, autonomy, and competence, all kind of when they're all supported, what you get is agency. You get this idea that I can do these things. I want to do these things. And so the true educative goal is simply turning playfulness into professionalism. That's the core of education. All the content knowledge, that's peripheral. This is what is central. Turning what you're play at into what you can be professional at. So, as teachers, because we have custody of children, we have a legal duty to meet the needs of our students, to nurture, which to me, at minimum, means meeting their needs, right? But before you can make valid academic demands, that has to happen first, not second or third. And that's currently the problem we have, is that academics are overvalued and needs are undervalued. And agency, I should say, agency is undervalued, both in teachers and students. So, my question for you, because this is pretty much, I think, almost the end of this presentation, is early learning professionalism setting the stage for or mitigating against this pattern? So there is a handout. The handout has information that I didn't, beyond what I've spoken, so it is distinct and different. But the first page has that, Venn diagram on it and stuff like that. And those are some books I wrote.